to breaking the grade.
Like many educators, Erin Dowd came from a family of educators. Her mom taught in the classroom, and her grandfather was kind of a rock star educator, breaking norms as a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent. But Dowd didn't always want to follow the teaching path, and she even explored being a marine biologist. By listening to our show today, you'll learn why Dowd decided marine biology was a bad idea. Hint, it had to do with seasickness. Why she eventually decided to become a teacher, and how that decade-long career took her from New Jersey all the way to the Netherlands and many places in between. And how today Dowd is a published author, congratulations, with her first book hitting Amazon and book stands worldwide just this past summer. So breakers, band together and book 30 minutes with Erin Dowd. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, cool. And of course, my co-host, my friend, my mentor, my sports sparring partner, John Gamba.
So Erin, as a triathlete who also gets seasick, I want to hear this story for sure.
Yeah, when I was younger, I loved dolphins and anything that came from the sea. And I had my heart set on being a marine biologist. I wanted to be among the dolphins for the rest of my life. And my wonderful Aunt Elaine, I think it was either my 12th or my 13th birthday, decided to take me on a whale watch out of the Boston Harbor. And I was so excited. This was like my moment, right? And we get out there and I am violently ill. Like sickness I have never experienced before in my life. It was horrendous and traumatizing. And there were whales and there were dolphins. I didn't see them. I was glued to the railing, all of that fun stuff that goes with it. And so my dreams of marine biology were dashed that day, because I love being on the water. I love being on boats, but I just couldn't make Dramamine a main part of my life. So.
And when it hits you, the drama means too late. That's what I've learned.
Yep.
That's okay. Yeah. Well, we got 3 people on the show who can get seasick pretty easily. So we started off low with this show.
Generally, yes, we did.
We're going
Sorry,
high.
Josh. I just had to ask.
Low. That's okay. You got it out of the way. That's fine. We're gonna take it back up high. Erin, we've interviewed a lot of people. I honestly don't think, and I mean this in the kindest of ways, that we've interviewed somebody who smiles as much as you. So I was really looking forward to this show, and the stories you're going to tell us. And one of the ones that you told me kind of in our pre-interview involves your father and your grandfather, and kind of how those two blend together. So if you can kind of tell us your storytelling and your education background through those two gentlemen.
Yeah, definitely. I like to think of these two examples of mentors in my life as seeds being planted very young. And this idea of seeds kind of follows me throughout my life, and hopefully we'll be able to weave that through as we go on.
We will.
So my father, from the time I was very little, he would tell my sisters and I stories that he would make up. Anything that was on his mind, little anecdotes. There was a story about a monkey who would get into trouble. There was William the Great Wolf. There was a family called the Schimmelfinnies who would go on these crazy vacations, based on us as a family, but these wild things that would happen. And so I just developed this love of storytelling and listening to stories. And, that was something that was a very big part of my childhood. And just reading too. Like my parents always read to me, and, there were always books in the house, and reading and literacy was an incredibly important part of my upbringing. And on the other side, my grandfather, my mother's father, that's the educator side of my family. My mom was a teacher for many, many years. She just retired a couple years ago. And my grandfather, her father, he was a teacher and a principal during segregation in New Jersey. He really, his career was all about building bridges and pushing boundaries and doing things in schools and in classrooms that nobody was talking about, nobody was doing. Like things that I learned like well after I got out of college, like student-driven learning and project-based learning. He was doing these things, back in the 1950s, and just hearing those stories as I was growing up, and all of the amazing things that he was doing in his schools stuck with me. And as I became a teacher later on, they filtered into my teaching and my want and need to kind of push boundaries too in my teaching as much as I could.
That's amazing. And now we'll continue to go back and hear the story, but now we're in a really interesting time for teaching, where there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of almost post-traumatic stress coming out of the pandemic. Do you ever kind of look back at that the time and watching your father, your grandfather, and sort of modeling certain behaviors and kind of coming up in your own mind is what makes a great teacher? Like you talk about project-based, you talk about storytelling, you talk about student-centered. What makes a great teacher?
I was really fortunate to not only have great teachers in my family, but also have really amazing teachers from preschool all the way up through college. I was really lucky in that way. I think many people out there cannot say the same thing. They didn't have as many amazing teachers as I've had. That's a tough question because I think what makes a great teacher is different for every student. And I think great teachers know that. They find out what their students need. They find out who their students are, and they can meet those kids where they are and push them up and help them become the people they're meant to be, and even more so than they even thought they could be. I think that's what great teachers do, is help kids find their passions and explore those things.
Yeah, that's really great. And as we think about the challenges that we have in the field, I saw a recent RAND research study that said 70% of teachers are thinking about leaving the field. 50% of teachers are unsatisfied in their work, and that's just so sad. When I think about your family and I think about my family, John, education in my DNA, with my father being in the school board and my mom being a university professor and my sister being a Montessori teacher. What do you think we need to do? Like, what's next in terms of turning this around? How do we get to 2030 and suddenly more professionals want to go into the field of teaching? And if you polled teachers then, more and more of them would be satisfied. What do you think the critical success factor is in terms of teacher satisfaction?
And before you answer that, Erin, can you draw some parallels, maybe not, as to why you got out of teaching when you did, 10 years in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this issue hits really close to home for me. I loved teaching. I loved the kids. I loved the planning. Like I loved doing it, right? And then I went through a really, really, really hard burnout, and I left completely. And I spent several years like working my way through, like getting myself back and deciding if education was even something that I wanted to pursue anymore. It was that bad. And I think, John, you hit on a word that really like stood out to me is professionals. I think one of the biggest issues with educators and education right now is that teachers are not treated as the professionals that they are. We go to school for a long time. Most of the teachers that I know have master's degrees and multiple master's degrees and training on top of training. Teachers are constantly going through training. I mean, when I left teaching, I had a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, an ESOL certification, a gifted certification. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And, you have these highly trained, highly professional people who are being handed, scripted curriculum, or,
Mhm.
being told how to manage every minute of their day, and then being piled on top of, on top of, on top of, and then not even making a living wage. So I think, I hate to say this, but like, everything has to change from salary and benefits and all of that side of, HR kind of stuff, to, what are teachers expected to do? What is that job description? We've got school shootings, we've got, you name it. Teachers are
Mm.
now responsible for everything that goes on. And it's astounding to me that people would want to stay at this point. I mean, 70% seems a little bit low, if I'm being honest. I mean, the conditions are horrendous, and you throw in a pandemic,
Yeah.
and gosh, like it's rare to find, teachers that are happy. And I think, it does come down to the teachers that are happy have really great administrators. They have a supportive environment. They're being treated like professionals. They have control over what they teach and how they teach. That's where the satisfaction comes from. It's not just one thing. It's not just pay teachers more. That's not going to fix it. When I was in the Netherlands, I made a good amount of money. Like, I was paid well. I had full benefits. I had lots of perks. I had a professional development stipend, but it was a toxic environment. So you have to have both. You have to have financial stability, and you have to be treated as a professional.
So, okay. So you decide to take a break,
Mhm.
and I'm reading some notes here. Spent time in Thailand, India, the UK, Honduras, and the United States.
Mhm.
Um, and this is your words. I weeded a lot of things out, which you're talking to two guys who are not afraid to admit that they're good with weeding things out. So appreciate you saying that. And then how'd you find your way back into education in a meaningful way?
Yeah, it took a while. So when I left teaching, I was in the Netherlands, and I told my students, I was teaching fifth grade at the time, and I knew I was leaving. I'd had enough. I was all kinds of things going on, and I told my kids, I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a writer. And they were like, oh, that's really exciting. Like, they were all excited about it. And in my head, I'm thinking, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like, yeah, sure, I'll write something. But that was the farthest thing from my mind. I just needed to get out of there and get out of there fast. So I took time, is what I did. Luckily I had a decent savings account, so I allowed myself time to explore. I traveled. I decided that I wanted to become a travel writer because that sounded like a really cool job to do. So I set up a travel blog, and I went to Thailand, and I was living that like blogger life for a couple weeks, and I was just like, oh, this is great. But the reality of it was, I was living in a tiny apartment in the States, and, I couldn't travel as much as I wanted to. I was writing articles for $25. Like, it was not the glamorous life that I wanted. I started picking up other jobs. I was like, oh, let me apply to grad school. Like, I was like hungry hippo to try to figure out what could I do next. I didn't want to teach. I didn't want to be in the classroom. I knew that for sure. Then I just, like you said, I started weeding things out. Like, okay, I don't want to do this. I was refinishing furniture for a little while, not for any like professional situation, but just because I didn't have any money, and I needed to furnish my apartment. And so just kind of did some random stuff. And I came across this organization called Moving Worlds, and they match professionals with volunteer opportunities around the world. And so I was like, well, that sounds interesting. I need something to do with myself. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I want to do. At this point, I had spent some time writing. I had drafted the book, but then I kind of put it aside because it was a way for me to just kind of process what I was going through. And so I wrote, I got it out. It felt good. And then it's like, okay, now what? So I put the book to the side, and I went to India. And in India, I worked at a school that was about 6 hours south of the closest major city. I was in the middle of nowhere. I had to walk a mile to the school every day in 100+ degree heat. I was working with kids who I didn't speak any Tamil. They didn't speak any English. It was a crazy situation. But through I was there for about 3 months, and through my time there, it kind of brought me back to the foundations of why I like teaching and why I like working with kids, and the potential that is there when working with kids. And I also got that global connection again. Traveling has always been a really important part of my life. It's something I love to do. In education, and the wheels started turning about how could I combine this global existence with education, but not within a school. And so after I left India, I kept thinking, and then I found this other opportunity in Honduras with an organization called Honduras Child Alliance, and I helped them write curriculum. And at that time, the UN Sustainable Development Goals had just come out, and I thought, wow, there's a lot of really interesting things going on in the world, and sustainability started to become a word that more people used. And I realized how many kids needed their eyes opened to the world, including kids in the US, especially kids in the US.
Yeah.
And so I started to make some connections, and that brought me to the world of EdTech randomly. And then by then I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for a job, ready for a full-time job. And I started working with this little EdTech startup that connected classrooms globally through collaborative projects. And I just thought, well, this is the perfect way to bring these two things, education and global, life together. And so that started a whole new aspect of my career at that point.
So you spent some time finding your place in the world.
You did.
Which, let me think, sounds like one of the themes from your book.
Yes.
So talk to us about the book, and talk to us about how you, a little bit how you write a book. And by the way, do you, kind of work in some of your own experiences in that book?
Oh, yes.
More than that, though.
Yeah, this book came from my soul. I first drafted it years ago.
Shipshape is the name.
Yes, shipshape. Which funny that it's like a nautical term, and my version.
Bringing it back there.
Hold on. We're all getting seasick again.
But the book has absolutely nothing to do with water. It has absolutely nothing to do with boats. But it does have a lot to do with teaching and the state of education. It's funny, when I was first writing it, my goal was to come up with like the craziest things I could think of about, what teachers would have to do, or like weird things that would happen in terms of like technology or monitoring. Well, as the years kept going by, I had to keep changing the things that I thought were crazy because they were actually beginning to happen. And so, what started out as, like data monitoring and video cameras in classrooms, I was like, man, like that's like normal now. And so that was the beginning version of the book that I had to change to some updated technology and some AI stuff. So there's a lot about teaching and education, and some of the things that I talked about earlier about the profession of teaching, and toxic environments and toxic administrators. Writing for me, this book.
Yeah, talk a little bit about the process, because it sounds like, you date back how long you've been writing this thing, so it takes a while.
Well, for me, it did. I have author friends who can pump out a book in no time at all. It's funny, the first draft of the book I wrote in a month. I participated in National Novel Writing Month, which is every November. where you essentially draft a novel in a month. And so I did that. And it was, it was kind of a shell of a novel. And so I went back and I would edit. And every year I would like pull it out and do some more editing. But it was a project for me. It was a project for me to process all of those issues I had with education. It was a way for me to like find myself again and find what I loved and wanted to do. It was a creative exercise, essentially. It gave me focus. It gave me something to go back to. It gave me a little discipline for certain stretches of time. And so, yeah, over the course of 8 years, I kept pulling out the book and editing and adding things to it and taking things away. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, this book needs to go out in the world. I need to stop editing. I need to stop spinning my wheels with it. I need to share it with others because, there's a lot in it, from encouraging kids to be change makers in their lives, to solving problems, to, like I said, what's going on in education. But there's also, it's a fun story. It's a little bit of escapism in terms of, there's robots and underground tunnels and fun stuff like that. But, there's also a serious side too. And I thought, it's got to go out there. I think people would enjoy it. I think teachers would enjoy it. I think kids would be entertained by it. And so I got serious and I did a final edit on it, started submitting to agents and publishers, and I found a publisher to pick it up. And then the whole process kind of went from there. It took about a year from the time I signed with a publisher to get it out there.
It's amazing. One of the things that I'm struck by with your story, Erin, is you see a lot of people kind of go out there and, okay, DNA, your roots, your genes, education. You go out there and you explore that world, and then something's just not right. Most people kind of feel that something's not right and just do nothing about it. Right. You actually look at the intentionality of what you are doing, kind of write it down, outline it, and try to impart change intentionally. There's a term that I use when mentoring entrepreneurs, and that's contemplative. It takes a lot to just go through the experience, take a step back, be contemplative, and then decide what the next move is going to be. And there's not a lot of people that can make that move with intention and start kind of work out what's going on as you're sensing some things that are wrong. I'll also say that you were so fast in listing the things that are important to develop resilience in the teaching workforce. But I'm doing a lot of work at a major research university on this issue, and a lot of the things that you kind of intuitively imparted are actually backed with research. So there's a resilience tracker that's being developed with help here at the Graduate School of Education. And they talk about living authentically. They talk about finding your calling. I have them listed here because we're working on them. Maintaining perspective, mastering stress, cooperative units and being cooperative and on teams. And then finally, building networks, which is a really important one, that when you're frustrated, I'm 70% of the people who are frustrated with teaching right now. How do I build a network to develop professionally? Maybe I veer out of the space like you did. Maybe I stay in it, but go into a different area. I mean, the education space is so wide, broad, and deep that you can go into different areas. But you kind of whipped it out without, and I'm like, wow, it took the researchers several years to figure out what you intuitively imparted. And I think that's based on the experiences you've had.
Yeah, that's what teachers do. I mean, we have everything internalized. Like we know because we're in it. We're around it all the time. And, it's great to hear that is supported by research, because that is what's happening. That's what teachers are experiencing. That's what
the benefit of being true. One of my mentors used to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but to, again, reinforce that, what we try to do with the research is answer the so what, now what? Okay, so we now know what is going to lead to resilience. What do we do about it? How do we create strategies and tactics to really deliver on those things that will really make you more resilient and a higher performing in the vocation of teaching. And so there's a lot of work being done in that area as well with our researchers. So it's exciting work.
Erin, the book covers everything from problems in the education system, breaking gender norms, finding your place, and there's some creativity in it as well. Like you said, robots and tunnels and adventure. So we generally don't do this on our show, but we absolutely want you to be successful with this book. So talk about how everybody can find it, get it, book you, so you can be out there talking more about not only the book, but the issues that, the story that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place is my website, eedowd.com, and links to all my social media, and contact me directly from there. I have to tell you though, I did my first school visit for the book online with a school in Argentina, and it was so much fun. We wrote together, the students and I, and we just had a ball, like deconstructing sentences and talking about, how to make writing more exciting. And, you talk about like this journey and me planting seeds throughout the whole thing. And it was a culmination of like bringing me back to teaching, doing something that I'm passionate about, and seeing kids who normally wouldn't be excited about writing get excited about writing. And their teacher told me after the fact, like some of the kids who never participate had their hands up the whole time. And it's such a reaffirming thing to have that, connection come back again. So I had to share that with you because, I want to be in schools in a different way now. And I think, going back to that original question of, what's next for education, like maybe we just need to rethink what school looks like, and be creative about that.
No doubt. I want to pick up on something you went really quickly over, and I want to come back to it on that issue of redesigning school and what school looks like. And that is, you talked about global mindedness. You talked about the sustainable development goals. You talked about project-based or team-based or collaborative learning, and maybe connecting students from different cultures, from different countries, to maybe solve a problem related to the sustainable development goals. There's been a couple of ventures that have come through my entrepreneur in residence hours that focus on that and address that. Tell us about that experience. Is that company, is that venture, is that platform still up and running? And what are they doing now to make those connections and build around this idea of global mindedness?
Yeah, so the great thing that's happened over the last few years is that there are many platforms and many companies and organizations that use the sustainable development goals to bring people together, whether it's students or teachers or adults or young people, solving problems and, finding a way out of the problems that we've created as humans, right? I was really fortunate to be involved in an organization called Unleash, and it brings together young people from all around the world, focusing on specific SDGs. So I worked on SDG for quality education, and there were other ones. And so it was all about basically using design thinking and the design process to look at ways to impact education around the world. And so I got to be a facilitator for that. And so, there are lots of organizations that are doing that. Design thinking is really becoming a great pairing to that, collaboration, all of that. So yeah, the global mindedness is kind of a result of doing the problem-based learning and collaboration and building empathy and all of those soft skills that that are talked about. But yeah, it's still going on. It's still a big thing, and I think there's becoming even more of a push now. There's a big project that goes on every year, Climate Action Project, that's run by a couple of colleagues of mine, and they bring together schools around the world to provide solutions for climate in different areas of the world. So I'm really encouraged to see that it's not just coming from a top level government mandate, but there's a lot of grassroots organizations and platforms that are coming up for that.
Yeah, I'd say that the idea of developing or thinking about design thinking with students through the lens of a goal, the Sustainable Development Goals, so that it's not ethereal. There's actually something tangible and something that you can review associated with the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a lot of curriculum. There's a lot of TED Talks. There's a lot of story-based learning that can be imparted into that specific goal that can be used. And if you teach students to be design thinkers, start with the end in mind, come up with a thesis statement, and then work together as a team to be able to deliver on whatever you're trying to deliver against that goal with a measure or an OKR, an objective and key result, you start to see the results from the students. So I applaud that. And I think that is part of the future of education. Not so much PARCC scores or Smarter Balance, but really, how do you develop the 5 C's to be more college and career ready? So I'm with you on that. And if that's incorporated in some of the components of your book, I'd love to continue to read into that and make some connections on your mission to be able to deliver in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've been working on is creating content that goes with the book. So I'll be providing lessons for teachers and discussion guides and alignment to the Sustainable Development Goals where it makes sense within the book, so teachers can make those connections as they're reading.
Fantastic.
What John hinted at, but I usually volunteer him for, is helping. And I'm always happy to help as well. And there's a community around us of breakers that we always talk about, who are teachers, who are entrepreneurs, who are writers, who are CEOs, who are whatever. And so absolutely, we want to kind of continue to have this discussion together, Erin. I think, you absolutely are still a teacher. It is definitely not gone from your DNA or your personality or your smile. You're just finally doing it maybe the way you really wanted to. You were able to avoid seasickness in marine biology, which always makes me remember the Seinfeld episode. I can't think of marine biology without the episode on Seinfeld. So,
I was going to say exactly that. I was going to say, let's continue to think about ways to change the world, but let's just not do it on a boat.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Totally. We're good. Well, this has been a wonderful segment and talking about your book and obviously your journey and everything in between. Like we said, from kind of New Jersey to the Netherlands and everything in between. I feel like we covered it. So Erin, thank you. We'll have all the information for your book in the show notes, and we want to revisit it once you kind of get through that curriculum, because I bet you'll have new and exciting stories that don't involve seasickness, but involve kind of the next chapter in your story in terms of how you get this book out. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Erin. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening, Breakers.